Hey there everybody, welcome to Auto Bears, and this is the facelifted Subaru Forrester e-Boxer. Now the Forrester has been with us for over 25 years, and it's one of those no-nonsense cars where it does exactly what it says on the tin. It's a practical family-friendly SUV that happens to look like an estate car, but if needed, it can go off-road and deal with the muddy stuff. Now over the years it has gotten bigger and heavier, but it's still fundamentally the same car. It's a big family-friendly SUV which can still go off-road. Now in these times of electrification, the latest generation Forrester does now come only as a hybrid. So I've had this Forrester for a week and I'm going to answer two questions. Number one, is it any good? And number two, in a world now where you can go to pretty much any manufacturer and get yourself an SUV that is a hybrid with all-wheel drive, how does the Forrester stack up against them? Stick with me to find out. So when it comes to the Forrester's styling, as I said, it's not really stepped away from what it was back in the late 90s. It is a practical SUV that happens to look a lot like an estate, especially with that boxy exterior, but it still maintains a good level of ground clearance, so you can go off-road and deal with the muddy stuff if needed. I will admit, I don't think the Forrester is going to win any beauty contests, but it looks very purposeful and actually looks very fitting to this environment. I think it definitely feels at home in the countryside. You have got 18-inch alloy wheels as standard, and they don't look as though they fill the wheel arches that much, but that actually is a good thing, because again, sticking with that ethos from Subaru, they want this to be a comfortable family SUV. And as I said, deal with the muddy stuff at the same time. And you won't want to be scratching your lovely alloy wheels if you've got 20s filling up the arches. So yeah, Subaru are definitely sticking to their guns on this one. And as I said, it's not the most handsome of car, but it definitely looks like it knows what it's doing. And on that note, I think it's now time we have a little look at the interior and see what it's like in there. Sat in the front of the Forrester, you are greeted by a very comfortable, well screwed together and well kitted out interior. However, the design does feel very old school, and if you are a current Subaru owner, you're going to feel right at home in here. But if you're coming from an outside brand in, it might feel a bit too old school for your liking in terms of its design. Now, because this is a mid-size to large-size SUV and we have got 220 millimeters of ground clearance, it does mean we've got a nice raised driving position. So getting in and out of the Forrester is actually really easy. So if you do suffer from any kind of mobility issues, I would recommend looking at the Forrester, but I will mention this. Even though I've got electrically adjustable seats here at the front, I don't have any lumbar support, which is a bit of a disappointment. So if you do have any lower back issues, then I would avoid looking at the Forrester. But there is plenty of adjustment in the seat itself and also in the steering, where I got both rake and reach adjustment. So getting the perfect driving position is easy. It's just that lack of lumbar support, which is a bit disappointing. Interior quality in the Forrester is actually pretty good, but there is a lot going on when it comes to the interior plastics. So we have got soft touch plastics here on top of the dash, on top of the doors as well. We've got this kind of textured rubber effect trim here on the dash as well, and a little bit below there we've got some leather trim on the dash. We've also got some leather trim here on the door panels as well, and also on the armrest. We have got a textured hard scratchy plastic here, and we've also got some satin effect trim surrounding the air vents. And then lower down we have got some harder, more durable plastics, and then there's a little bit of this kind of rubber effect trim here on the center console, which is nice to lean your leg against when you're on a long journey. And there is a little bit of piano black plastic here surrounding the gear knob. So there is a lot going on in terms of the materials used, especially the way that they're integrated into the design of the Forrester's interior. But everything does feel very sturdy, and I've not experienced any kind of creaks or rattles whilst driving around in the Forrester this week, so that is a bonus. So yeah, it does actually feel pretty well screwed together in here. Cubby spaces in the Forrester are actually pretty good in here. We got some decent sized door pockets where you can get a medium to large sized bottle of drink in there, but they're not lined with any fabric, so loose items will rattle around a bit. Now on the center console in front of the gear lever, we got a little tray area which is rubber lined, and we have got a couple of USB charging inputs, an aux-in cable and a 12-volt socket. However, the tray area is not quite large enough to put your phone in there flush, especially if you've got a cable attached to it if you want to use Apple CarPlay or Android Auto. Now, I've got an iPhone 14 Pro, but I think if you've got a Pro Plus or Pro Max, it might not fit in there flush. So that's just something to be aware of. Now behind the gear lever, we have got a couple of cup holders. They are rubber lined as well, and they are of a decent size and depth. What I like as well is that you can actually remove the divider in the middle, so you can have a larger area there, but it does mean if you put a drink or a cup in there, it's going to kind of wobble all over the place. But I do like its design. Then underneath the armrest, we have got a little tray area here where you can put some spare change or perhaps your wallet, but underneath there we have got a bit of additional space, which is very handy, and we've got an extra 12-volt socket. And just checking out, it is also lined with cloth, so loose items won't make any noise in there. So that's very handy. And then finally we've got the glove box, which is of an okay size. However, the book pack is pretty big, so if I take that out, we've got a decent amount of space in there, but again, it's not lined with any fabric, so loose items will rattle around in there. And I will mention as well that if you do have a bit of a leak coming from your tyres, or they need a bit of a pump up, the tyre pressure set button is in the glove box as well, so that's just something to be aware of for you. And then finally, even though we have got a sunroof, we do have a little pocket to put your sunglasses in there, so that is actually really cool and very handy. So yeah, when it comes to cubby spaces here in the Forrester, they're not too bad. Now, as I mentioned, the Forrester has a very old school feel to it, and by that as well I mean there's a lot of buttons here on the interior. So if you're not one for modern technology and everything being done via a touchscreen, you're going to feel right at home in here. So we have got a couple of shortcut buttons and rotary knobs just below the infotainment system. We even have a CD player as well. It's been a long time since I've seen one of these in a car. Then just below there, we've got your dual zone climate control, which is very easy to use when on the move. And you've even got your heated seat buttons as well. Unfortunately, you don't get ventilated. Then behind the gear lever, we have got a little camera view button. So this turns on the reversing camera. And we've also got a very unique camera on the wing mirror on the left hand side, or on the passenger side in the UK. And it kind of points forward and makes sure that I don't hit anything in that corner of the car when reversing. It's a bit of a unique view to see, and it is one to kind of get used to. At the moment, I've not really found myself in any particular danger of hitting anything, so I do sometimes question the usefulness of that camera. But if we had something like Hyundai Group's blind spot cameras, yeah, that would be really cool in here. But no, we do have just one camera on that wing mirror. Then in the center, we have got your drive mode select. So this is for going off-road, or your X mode select, I should say. So you can have got snow and dirt, and you've got deep snow and mud. Now, one thing you might find missing on the interior is actually a hill descent control button, which is something you would expect in this type of car. But as soon as you put it into dirt or snow, or deep snow and mud, it automatically engages the hill descent control, which is actually a really cool feature. And then we got your electric handbrake and your auto hold button as well. Now, on the steering wheel, we've got loads of buttons here. So on the left-hand side, these are your audio and communication controls, but there's also an info button which deals with the little display we got on the top of the dashboard. Then underneath there, we have got a couple of buttons which deal with the driver data display, and you can go through the various menus there. And then on the right-hand side, we've got your radar-guided cruise control buttons, and we've also got your Subaru Intelligent Drive buttons, essentially kind of eco and sport, if you will. And then underneath that, we've got a heated steering wheel button. And then finally, on the right hand side, underneath the air vent, we've got a plethora of buttons here, and these deal with various kind of boot opening or safety modes and features on the Forrester. As you can see, they're on the screen now. There is quite a few of them, and even one of them deals with adjusting the height on the boot lid. So if you're a bit of a short person, yep, you can easily select that and get the boot to open up at your correct level. So at least that's one handy feature there. So yeah, when it comes to that old school feature, there are lots of buttons in here to kind of press and touch and use whilst you're on the move. So as I said, if you like that in the car, you'll have no issues whatsoever. So now we move on to probably the Achilles heel to the Forrester's interior, and that's the infotainment system. It's an 8-inch touchscreen display, and 8 inches in this day and age is just not big enough, considering the fact as well that this is the top of the range spec in the Forrester range. Also, the graphics are quite basic and it's not the most responsive to use when on the move. But luckily you do get things like Apple CarPlay and Android Auto, which is actually very handy. And it is only on the Sport and the top of the range Premium that you do get satellite navigation as standard. And then, yeah, it's just not big enough in this class of car, especially as this particular car is over £40,000. And then just above it, we have got this extra little display, and you can go through various menus, looking at your off-road settings, looking at your sat-nav, what you're listening to, etc. It is quite handy, but again, going with the design of the interior, it is feeling very, I'm going to say old-fashioned now, because I do remember this kind of setup in a 2012 Honda CR-V. And yeah, Honda were very quick to kind of learn from that and evolve the interior, and that's something I'd like to see on the next generation of Forester from Subaru. And then in front of the steering wheel, we have got a traditional analog dial display, and yeah, it's nice and easy to read. It's very clear. There's a little driver digital display in the center, so you can go through your driver data whilst you're driving. And again, it just kind of adds to that old-fashioned, old-school feel to the Forester. So as I said at the beginning, it does feel very old school and old-fashioned in terms of the design in the Forester, which some people will like, but I just know if you're coming from certain brands with a much more modern-looking interior, this might feel like a bit of a step backwards. So yeah, that's kind of the Achilles heel to the Forrester's interior. And finally, one big thing which is a positive is just how much air and light I've got in this interior. I think this is absolutely wonderful. This is a highlight, is just how much space there is being sat in the Forester. Yeah, I have had somebody who's over 6'4" tall sat in the front, and he loved it. He just loved the amount of space and air that was in here. And I've also got a sunroof on this premium trim, which again just adds to the extra light in here. And one thing I do like is that it's not a small sunroof. There's actually a decent size to it, so it does allow a lot of light into the cabin. So yeah, it has its positives here in the Forester, but there are its negatives as well, especially when it comes to its design. But on that note, I think it's enough of looking at the front of the Forester. Let's see what it's like in the back seats. Sat in the back of the Forester, it is pretty spacious back here with a couple of quirky features, but there are a couple of areas for improvement. Now, firstly, getting in and out of the back of the Forester is really easy because the doors open nice and wide. And then once you're sat here, you do find there is a good amount of space. Now, that driver's seat is set to my driving position. I'm 5'7" tall and 5'7" wide. And as you can see, I've got a really good amount of knee room, but headroom is starting to feel a little bit tight. So if you are over 6 foot tall, you'll find your head rubbing against the ceiling. Also, you do find that the rear seats seem to feel quite high. I do feel like I'm sat above the driver in the back here, and that's probably due to all the hybrid gubbins being underneath the passenger seats. And then also, when it comes to space itself, you could easily get 2 adults back here. I would probably say 3 adults at a push, as long as they're not as wide as me. But you could easily get 3 kids back here. And speaking of kids, we have got ISOFIX supports on the outer seats. And what I like is that there are these little Velcro covers just covering the ISOFIX bars, so it's actually really easy to affix a child's seat. Now, cubby spaces are pretty good back here as well. We got some very decent sized door pockets. Again, you can get a medium to large size bottle of drink in there, but they're not lined with fabric, so loose items again will rattle around a bit. Now, we have got this kind of double kind of aeroplane style pockets on the back of the front seats. And there's actually a little slot here which is clear to put your mobile phone in, so that way you can have it charging because you've got 2 USB charging ports here. So that's really handy. And then we have got a centre armrest, which if I pull down does show a couple of extra cup holders there, and actually they've not had the plastic wrapping taken off them, so I'll help you out there, Subaru. But I will mention that there's no through loading through the centre here into the boot area. And then when it does come to features, we have got heated seats, which are operated via a couple of buttons here, a couple of vents here as well, so you can get a bit of air conditioning into the back of the Forrester. The windows are of a really nice, big, bright, square area, but unfortunately they don't open all the way down, just around about 90%, but at least it is enough that I can just about rest my arm on the window edge there. So all in all, being sat here in the back of the Forrester is not too bad. It is pretty good in some areas, but does need a little bit of improving in others. The other thing as well, as you can probably see, is I am sat quite upright. However, there's no ability to recline the seats back at all, which again is a little bit disappointing. But a bonus, just like the front, is it does feel real nice, light and airy in here. So that is a real bonus. But yeah, it's quite nice back here in the Forrester. As I said, it's very good in some areas, but needs improving in others. And now I think it's time that we get out of the back seats and we see what it's like in the boot. Opening the boot of the Forrester presents you with 509 litres of space, which in this segment of car isn't really that impressive anymore. Unfortunately, it is beaten by the likes of the Toyota RAV4 and Kia Sportage. However, when you get the boot open, you are presented by a really nice wide square load area, and actually the boot lip itself is not too high and is flat. Just be wary to avoid hitting the bumper when loading any heavy objects into the back of the Forrester. And it's not devoid of features either. We've got some very sturdy tethering hooks. We've actually got quite a few shopping hooks as well, and a couple of little levers there to get the rear seats down from the boot area. And we've also got a 12-volt socket. We have got a bit of additional underfloor storage, which is very handy, and you can actually put the tonneau cover underneath the boot floor as well if you want to get the seats down and carry any heavy bulky items. And in fact, you almost have a completely flat load area, which is very handy in this type of car, especially with those boxy dimensions. So yeah, when it comes to the practicality side of the Forrester, it is starting to lag behind some of its key rivals, but it's still a very practical car nonetheless, and has quite a few tricks up its sleeve as well. And on that note, I think it's time we get the boot shut on the Forrester and take it for a drive. So once you start driving the Forrester, first impressions are pretty positive. It is very comfortable and it's a nice, pleasant place to be. Now, because this is classed as an SUV and we got that raised driving position, when it comes to visibility in the Forrester, the one word I would use is excellent. I got a brilliant view of the road ahead. The A-pillars are not too thick, so I've not found myself looking around them at any junctions. The wing mirrors are of a decent size, and I have got blind spot monitoring. You get blind spot monitoring on all trim levels, by the way. And also, if I look over my shoulder, I actually see I've got a relatively thin C-pillar. And then rear visibility is absolutely brilliant. I've got a massive rear screen at the back because of that boxy shape of the Forrester. So yeah, all-round visibility is excellent. It's arguably one of the best cars I've driven when it comes to visibility from the inside, and I am hugely impressed by it. So yeah, first impressions when you start driving the Forrester, they are pretty good. It is a comfortable SUV to drive. Now, when it comes to trim levels in the Forrester range, there are 3 to choose from. There's the entry-level XC, the mid-range Sport, and the top-of-the-range Premium, which is what I've got here. And in all honesty, go for the XC. Have a look at that one and see if you're happy with it. Because in terms of safety, all cars come with the same Subaru EyeSight safety system, which is arguably one of the best out there. And the Forrester does come with a Euro NCAP 5-star rating. So if safety is important to you, then this is definitely one car to look at. And really, if you're looking at the sports, you're looking more at the aesthetics. You're looking at the fact it's got kind of a sporty exterior and interior touches to liven it up and make it look a little bit sporty. But again, this is not a sporty SUV. This is very much a family-friendly one. And then if you go for the premium, really what you're going to be getting is satellite navigation, the full leather interior with heated seats at the front and rear, heated steering wheel, and you've also got a sunroof. So in all honesty, have a little look at the XC, and if you really want to kind of step up, I think it's only about 2 or 3 grand to get yourself into a top of the range premium. And that's when you are looking at the things, like I said, like the leather, the heated seats and the sunroof. So yeah, my recommendation, look at the XC and then work your way up. Because even if you go for the entry-level car, it is very safe, and all cars as well come with the same engine, same performance and same economy. So really it just comes down to trim. So let's talk about that engine. So under the bonnet we have got a 2-litre 4-cylinder naturally aspirated petrol engine, and when combined with the hybrid setup, we've got 148 brake horsepower and 194 newton meters of torque, which means that the 0 to 62 time in this Forrester takes a smidge under 12 seconds, 11.8 to be precise, which means it's not really the quickest car out there. Not only that, the power goes to all 4 wheels via a CVT box. Now I could even hear some of you groaning when I mentioned that, and yes, again, we have got that old school feel to the Forrester, because with the CVT it does kind of wind up and give you that traditional CVT groan and high revs when you put your foot down. And yes, you do get the engine noise coming into the cabin. And then when it comes to economy, because this is a hybrid after all, Subaru say that on a combined WLTP cycle, I should get just shy of 35 miles per gallon, and I do believe them. Now on my daily commute as a round trip, it's around 15 miles, and I'm getting around 32, 33 mpg. If I put my foot down, that does very quickly drop, but when I'm on the motorway, you are going to see it around the 30s. The only problem is that's not really that economical when compared to some of its rivals. The big kind of trump card for the Forrester is what it can do off-road, because you have got that symmetrical all-wheel drive system. But if economy is important to you and off-road ruggedness is not, or ruggedness I should say, look at something from the Hyundai group, from the Volkswagen group, or Stellantis, because you will find a car that is more economical with 2-wheel or perhaps with all-wheel drive as an option. And then that way, you know, you've got the confidence to have something that's great on road and will be frugal at the same time. So that's another thing as well with the Forrester. It's just the engine up front with that hybrid system. It's just not as economical as I would like it to be. So what's the ride and refinement like in the Forrester? Well, ride-wise, it's a little bit kind of a mixed bag, because sometimes it's excellent, other times it's quite loud, boomy, and a bit fidgety. Now, I'm driving on a rough piece of tarmac, and I know it's had a couple of potholes filled in, but as I'm driving along, I can feel some of the bumps and undulations kind of coming through into the cabin, but as I speed up, it does start to smooth out. Now, I have got a little piece of tarmac which is very rough, and this is one thing I'm hugely impressed with in the Forrester, because as I go through it now, I could hear some of it, but I couldn't feel it. It didn't skip a beat. But yeah, I could hit a pothole at 40 miles an hour, not feel it, but I would actually hear a boom come into the cabin. It's quite a weird thing to kind of describe. You would have to take a test drive in the Forrester in order to really experience it. But the bias to the Forrester is definitely on comfort. It's not a sporty car in any way, shape or form. And I'm going to deliberately just drive over these bumps and undulations, and you can probably hear them, but it's not uncomfortable. This deals with those bumps and imperfections really well. I am impressed by it. It's just the fact of it's really kind of set to being a more comfortable car than a sporty one. Now, there is a trade-off when it comes to the handling side of the Forrester, and that means that when you go into corners, it will tend to roll and lean and have a little bit of a pitch. And if you go over any kind of level crossings or humpback bridges, there's a little bit of body float, but it does settle down quickly. Again, the emphasis of the Forrester is on comfort. It's just the fact of there are cars out there which have a slightly firmer suspension setup, so the faster you go, the more it settles down, and if you go around the corners at speed, yes, it will be a bit more level and planted than the Forrester. But again, Subaru know what their market is and who they're targeting. And for those who live out in the country who want a car that can go off-road and deal with the rough stuff but still be comfortable, you can't really go wrong with it. Now, when it comes to the refinement side of the Forrester, again, it's a little bit of a mixed bag, because sometimes, like now, it feels quite quiet and refined, and then sometimes you can get a huge amount of tyre roar coming into the cabin, or perhaps you could get a bit of wind noise coming off the wing mirrors. Now, of course, because we have got a CVT transmission, yes, you do get that engine tone coming into the cabin. But as I drive along here, so I'm going to go 40 miles an hour, actually feels very refined. This road is surprisingly smooth, even though it's kind of off the beaten track. But I know if you do drive on a bit of a rough surface, it will give you a bit of tyre roar coming into the cabin. But doing a long journey, I've not really experienced any major issues when it comes to refinement. And the other thing I will mention is that I have got a really good stereo here in the Forrester. I don't think it's a Harman Kardon that I experienced like the Outback. I think it's a stock stereo, but it is a really good one, and it does kind of cover any of those intrusions you would get from the outside coming into the cabin. So yeah, you can do a long journey in the Forrester, and it is pretty refined. And then when you've got the handling, yes, because it is built for comfort, it is a little bit leany and rolly in the corners, but there's a good amount of weight in the steering. Parking's an absolute doddle as well. It is light enough for that. But just don't drive the Forrester thinking that there's any STI heritage coming through from its rally years. Unfortunately, they're not there. This is a family-friendly SUV, not a sporty one. Now, when it comes to your drive modes in the Forrester, it is a little bit different than you would get in a traditional SUV. In those cars, you usually get your normal, your sport, and your eco settings. But with the Forrester, they're in two different positions and they operate two different types of drive mode. So on the center console, we've got your X mode dial. So that's if you want to go off-road. And if you go to the left, you get snow and dirt. And if you go to the right, you get your deep snow and mud. I will mention that hill descent control automatically engages when you go into one of those settings. And then on the steering wheel, we have got a button here which says S and I, and that's Subaru's intelligent driving system. Basically, this is your eco and your sport mode. Although, when I say sport, you just get a little bit more urgency when you put your foot down. Doesn't really do much to the ride and the steering. It just means that you can kind of put your foot down and make full use of that 148 brake horsepower and that sub 12 second 0 to 62 time. So again, this isn't the kind of sporty SUV that we've come to get used to with other manufacturers. This is, as I've mentioned before, very much tailored and catered for the family-friendly and comfort experience. So what have been some of the highlights and some of the low points I've experienced living with the Forrester this week? Well, highlights have definitely been the comfort levels, the safety levels, and knowing that I've got that off-roading capability there if I need it. On one of the days that I had the Forrester, it was actually snowing. Okay, granted, we had a couple of inches of snow. Now, to my American viewers, please don't laugh at that. I know you guys can get like a foot of snow in certain places overnight, But in the UK, 2 inches of snow is enough to shut the country down. They did in fact close some of the schools around me. But this didn't skip a beat, it just handled the snow absolutely brilliantly. And on a couple of little areas where it actually got a little bit kind of slippery, I'll just put it into snow and dirt mode. And yeah, it was absolutely fine. So knowing that I've got a really good all-wheel drive system is quite comforting to know, and will give me that confidence when, you know, the weather gets really hazardous. Now, the safety systems as well have been a real highlight, but one of the things that has been a little bit tedious, I'll say, are these little LED lights that flash up when I have the radar guided cruise control on. I understand when it's green, everything's going all right. It'll go amber if I stray over the white line, or it'll go red if, for example, I take my hands off the wheel and it starts going nuts and telling me to take control of the car. I like the idea of it, but it just seems a little bit old-fashioned with these LED lights. I'd like to see perhaps a dedicated head-up display. Other little niggles I've come across, well, we have got an auto hold button here, and you have to press it every single time you get back into the car, and that's a little bit annoying, especially is that I could actually put the heated seats on and that always stays on. If I put it on the hottest setting and I get out of the car, when I come back in, it still stays on. So why is it that stays on but the auto hold doesn't? So that's something I'd like to see Subaru work on. And then finally we've got range. So the Forrester comes with a 46 litre fuel tank, and when topped up I've got a range of around 300 miles. I'm sorry, in this day and age I don't really think that's good enough, even as a hybrid car. So yeah, those are really been kind of the pros and cons I've experienced with the Forrester. I mean, I've covered pretty much everything else in regards to the infotainment system and everything. It is very dated now, especially when compared to rivals, but I have to go back to it. This is one of those cars that if you want old school and you live out in the country, you can't go wrong with it. So yeah, I think it's now time we move on to the conclusion of the Subaru Forrester. So what are my thoughts on the Subaru Forrester e-Boxer? Well, there is a lot to like about the Forrester. It is very comfortable, it's very safe, and it is a practical SUV. The only problem is, in some key areas, rivals are starting to overtake it. There are more practical rivals out there, there are more efficient rivals out there. The main ace card for the Forrester is what it can do off-road. That off-roading capability, which really does trump most of, if not all of, its rivals. And that's the one thing, its customer base, they're very loyal with Subaru. They're going to stick with cars like the Forrester and the Outback because they know what it can do. And until another manufacturer comes out with a car where its off-wheel drive system is superior to what Subaru have, yeah, they're not going anywhere. But the problem is Subaru need to get fresh customers in. And yes, they might get a few in with their Solterra EV, but that's a car that starts at just a smidge under £50,000. They need to work on their main lineup, the Forrester, the Outback and the XV. And what I'd love to see them do is get some full hybrids made and some plug-in hybrids made, so that way it will really boost their efficiency. Just look at the practicality side of the vehicles as well, just try and make them a bit more practical. And then we got the infotainment system, which just feels, especially in the Forrester, way behind pretty much all of its rivals. The one major blessing is that we have got Apple CarPlay and Android Auto. And I still feel there's a place for Subaru in the UK and Europe, but I'm just worried they're going to go the way of Mitsubishi and they're going to get pulled out of the UK and Europe, and we're just going to see Subaru in the US, in Asia and Australasia, because they do sell really well there. So Subaru, please don't leave the UK and Europe. Please just work on getting some more efficient types of cars out there. You've got plenty of space back there for larger batteries, so let's use it. Let's use that space. Get more customers in. I mean, no one else is going to beat you when it comes to going off-road, so yeah, you still have a place here, but just work on the flaws on these cars, work on the efficiency, Because especially in this world where we're having a cost of living crisis, it all comes down to the pounds and the pennies. And if there are more efficient cars out there, and we only get snow once a year, if that, people are going to be happy to go elsewhere. Even if they got all-wheel drive and they're hybrids, they'll just be more efficient and they'll be more powerful as well. So yeah, the Forrester is a really good car. I really do like it, even though it has its drawbacks. Its trump card is what it can do off-road. But Subaru, you need to do more. You need to do more with these cars, because I'm afraid and I'm worried that you're going to go the way of Mitsubishi. It's a great car and I don't want it taken away from us. Not like the Impreza. Because the blooming Americans, they have a WRX and we don't have anything. So everyone, I hope you've enjoyed my review on the Subaru Forrester e-Boxer. If you've got any questions about the Forrester and my time with it, please put them down in the comments section below. Don't forget to like, don't forget to subscribe and hit that bell notification icon to let you know when I, Dave the Auto Bear, bring out a new video. Of course, I'm on social media, so don't forget to follow on there as well, like Facebook, Instagram and Twitter for additional content. But in the meantime, guys, have yourselves a wonderful day, and I will catch you all in the next video. So take care, everybody, and bye-bye.